Okay, well, we're out here having some fun with the 22RE. I just kind of wanted to show what I was doing. I'm using this honing deal that I got off Amazon. Now, I do have, let me show you the other one here. I do have one of these. This is an old one I used to rebuild a 66 Mustang back in the day. You can see I got one of them chipped the stone, but I have a replacement set. I was gonna use these, but after kind of thinking it over and watching some YouTube videos, I decided to go with this Flex Hone. This is, what size is this here? This one is the 95 millimeter, and of course my bores are 92.5 millimeters. The directions are pretty good. You can see, put a little oil on the cylinders, toss in your drill, and then trying to get a 45-degree crosshatch. It recommends between 20 and 45 seconds. I'm doing it for about roughly twice that long, so about 90 seconds. And then I'm cleaning it with some spray cleaner and wiping things down. I've already done 2 of the cylinders. These guys here, let me grab my flashlight out of my back pocket here and see if you can kind of see how it's doing, but pretty easy to use. I just took a microfiber rag and stuck it down on top of the crank, and then cut a little piece of cardboard in a circle using the piston as a template. So you can see, pretty nice pattern. I've still yet to do the back 2 there. Of course, the one that I'm most concerned about is cylinder number 2, where it's got those little gouges at the top and in a couple different areas. But running the hone kind of helped those mildly. I did, on that big one you can see at the top there, which is the worst of the lot. What I did was I took a hot melt glue gun and I squeezed some glue into that little area of the cylinder wall, and I waited for it to dry, to harden, and then I peeled it off and I took it over to my desk and I used just a veneer caliper to get an approximation of how deep that gouge is at its kind of worst point there. And if you see the 2 little kind of line, the little, let me see if I can get them, you can kind of see those 2 little lines. Those represent the upper and lower compression rings. So you can kind of see the lower compression ring is down below the worst of the stuff. So yeah, it probably will affect the compression reading in cylinder number 2, but the truck's been running with broken rings for probably the better part of a year or so, and it's been running fantastic. So this is not a race motor. My 3RZ project, that is a race motor. Probably spend anywhere between $15,000 and $25,000 building that. What this is an old 22RE truck motor that I inherited. So I can feel people in the comments racing to comment on my approach here, but let me tell you what my thinking is. Now, I've ordered a set of Keith Black Hyper Eutectic pistons, 1/2 millimeter over, which is what the block currently is. And I have a set of Total Seal rings, which should seat out against the walls a little bit better than what was ever in here. And my thinking is, let's give it a shot. It'll be interesting to see what the real world kind of results are, Worst case, I'm just back where I started and I'm out a couple $100, and I've maybe learned a few things along the way. Best case, the truck runs fine, doesn't burn too much oil, and the compression isn't excessively low on account of the little scratches. I'm kind of curious to see what the results are going to be, actually. The Keith Black pistons, they come from LC Engineering. Because I already had ordered Total Seal rings, I opted to just get them from Summit Racing. without the rings. But they do bump the compression ratio up a little bit. I forget what the stock compression ratio on the 22RE is, but I think it's 9.0 or 9.4 to 1 or something. The Keith Black pistons have a better alloy because they're the hyper eutetic aluminum, which it just basically means it has a higher silicon content, so they can withstand more heat and more abuse, which is going to be needed for cylinder number 2, I have a feeling. They're generally considered better than cast, run-of-the-mill pistons, but they're not as good as forged pistons. But I'm not running forced induction on this or anything. I'm just using this to tool around, run errands to the store kind of stuff. So, like I say, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this approach. My thinking again is, let's give it a shot, see what the results are. We'll all definitely learn something from kind of giving it a go. If things turn out to be horrible, I'm just back where I started, and then yes, I'm going to have to pull the block out and bore over another 20 thousandths or perhaps 40 thousandths. Now, given that the depth of the little mark there in the cylinder, as measured by my little hot melt trick, it's about 10 thousandths. So if I was to take this over to the machine shop and have them cut down the cylinder another 20 thousandths over, it's a pretty good chance that 95% of that will go away. I might get crazy and go, because I'm not going to run this motor for more than a couple of years, I might get crazy and do another 40, and then I'd have a motor that's 60 over. And I think that would definitely take out the imperfections. That's a discussion I'll have to have with the machinist who will be doing the boring. At this point, I'm going to probably just put the motor back together with the new pistons. I've got some new rod bearings going, as you saw in the previous video. The rods are all taken apart here. I did measure the rods. They're in good shape. Most of the wear was on account of the bearings here, obviously. I am switching over from the factory rod bolts to some ARP jobs that I got. Can't remember if I got those off Amazon or maybe I got them from Ellis Engineering, but they're floating around over here somewhere. Let me see if I can find them. As you can see, I've got my entire motor in the back of the pickup here. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah, I think this is them down here. Oh, and as mentioned, I'm going to use some diamond compound valve lapping stuff to lap the valves in a little bit better. So here's the ARP rod bolts for specifically the part number. You can see right there for the 22RE. So these are a little bit nicer. I'll just pop them in and should be okay. And then I've got a little, over here I've got one of those little kind of crank it and grind the rings. So I'm going to fit the rings in. Probably run about, rule of thumb is usually, if I'm not mistaken, it's 4 thousandths per inch of bore. So the 22RZ is got, what would it be, 3.65 or 3.64 inches of bore on a 92.5 millimeter. So that's going to be about 15 thousandths clearance. Somewhere around here I've also got a real cool little piston insertion tool. I don't know where that went to, but it's floating around here somewhere. And then you can see I'm going to put on some Total Seal rings. These are the guys here, 20 thousandths over. Now, with regard to, I don't know where my little piston installation tool went to, but it's just one of those aluminum. It's from Wiseco. I don't know. I thought it was sitting around here somewhere. It's from Wiseco, and it's an aluminum, basically just an aluminum ring with a slant to it. Might be sitting over on my desk over there. In any event, if anyone's curious, I can link it in the description. What was I saying here? There was something I wanted to say. What the heck was it? Rod bearings, the rings, the total seal rings, the ring gaps. And you see I made a little tool to drive out the piston pins. So anyways, that's kind of the approach. Oh, I know what it was. I wanted to discuss the bearings. So these, if you look at them, these are, I don't know if you can see that right there, but in that little circular job there, these are ACL bearings, and the 10 on those indicate that they're for a journal, rod journal, which has been ground down 10/1000ths of an inch, or a 1/4 millimeter. So that tells you, what the situation is with the big end of my rods and the crank journals that are in the crankshaft on the block. Now, by looking at the wear pattern of these, you can tell that these are tri-metal bearings, which are pretty good bearings actually. Whoever did this motor used good parts. Pistons are ACL, and I don't know what rings they had that split in half, and I still don't know why they split in half. I suspect maybe nobody gapped these things. And then they had the ACL bearings. Now, the bearing, as I mentioned in my previous video, the bearings that I like are the Molly or the Mala, depending on where you're from, Clevite bearings. Unfortunately, they make a 77 bearing in tri-metal, and they have a lot of bearings. You can go on their website and look up all the stuff there. I use Mala components almost exclusively with my chainsaws. It's a real good German company, well regarded among racing teams. Unfortunately, the bearing that I was going to use for this job on the big end of the rods is a Molly Clevite 77. If I remember the part number off the top of my head, it's CB1218P, and then in my case it'd be -25 millimeter since they're oversized. Unfortunately, I discovered that they apparently no longer make that bearing. I'm still waiting to confirm that, but based on all my sources where I get parts, everyone has basically kind of sung the same tune, and that bearing isn't made anymore, not since COVID. I don't know if that has to do with European regulations to reduce lead or what, but it's been superseded by the CB1218A, which is a bimetal aluminum bearing. I'm sure that's a very good bearing for a street car, and it'd be perfectly suitable. But and I actually have some of those on order from LC Engineering. But what I decided to do is get tricky and search around to see who else might make a tri-metal bearing. And that's basically a steel back bearing with a bronze alloy surface, and then usually a Babbitt composition kind of surface here. Now, of course, normally you have a layer of oil between your bearings and the crank, so normally the surface of the bearing should not really be touching your crank. So this is indicative of probably a twist in one of my rods or in the crankshaft or something. Who the heck knows what. Under normal circumstances, you have it's kind of, well, I don't want to go into all the technical aspects of it, but basically it's a wedge compressed oil film that lives in here, and as long as your spacing is correct, then you basically have a thin oil film here. Anyway, to get back on track, what I was getting at was I sourced some other bearings actually found them on Amazon, believe it or not. And what were they? They were Sealed Power, which I think is actually made by Federal, but I could be wrong. But Sealed Power still makes a tri-metal ring for the 22RE. At least I was able to find them in their catalog for the big end of the connecting rod. So that's what I'm probably going to put into the truck, even though I'm just kind of fooling around here, as you can tell with my kind of shade tree rebuild. And I kind of got to do air quotes for rebuild. It's not really a rebuild. I'm not blueprinting anything. This is just kind of a freshening up and hoping for the best. Call it a hone and go kind of approach. But like I say, don't crucify me in the comments, because I'm just doing this to see if I can get the truck back on the road, and I'm kind of curious. As they say in Pulp Fiction, I'm kind of curious myself. I'm kind of curious to see what the net result of this kind of leaving that little guy in the cylinder is going to be. So that's where we are on the. I think there might be some glue on the cylinder. I got to get that. So that's where we are on the 22RE and the pickup truck. Pistons will be here, I think on Monday or something. Or no, the pistons are going to be here tomorrow. I think the Sealed Power rings will be here on Monday. In the meantime, I'm going to be busy honing my heart out on with this little ball hone over here, and we'll put everything back together and see what happens. Now, with regard to the cylinder head, I've got to lap the valves in, because I still don't know if there might not have been a failure of some kind on the intake valve on cylinder number 2. When I did a leak down test and a compression test running compressed air in the cylinder, I'm pretty sure that air came through the intake port back into the intake manifold. Now, the only other thing that might have happened that I didn't catch was it might have gone down the damaged cylinder wall into the crankcase and then up through the PCV or fresh air breather with enough velocity to make it sound like it was coming out of the number 2 cylinder. So it could have been not the valve, but that damage on the ring, letting air into the crankcase and then popping out through the fresh air breather for the positive crankcase ventilation. So that's kind of still a mystery. A lot of these questions will be answered when I slap the motor back together, fire her up, and see what the heck happens. Again, this is not how you rebuild a motor. This is just me fooling around to see what happens, to see if I can get the truck back on the road. And if I just end up back at square one, okay, no problem. I'll end up pulling the block out and boring it, or sourcing another block and doing it the right way. So stay tuned, and we'll see how this all goes down. Okay, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to use the section below. Thanks as always for watching.